After U.S. President Trump is finished with the NATO summit, he heads to the U.K. for his first state visit there. Today, Trump said that country is in turmoil after a number of high-profile departures from Theresa May's government. Her Conservative Party is divided over how to proceed with Brexit. So what specific issues are driving them apart? Is Prime Minister May in a lose-lose situation? Joining me now from London is Conservative Member of Parliament for Brigg and Goole, Andrew Percy. Hi, Mr. Percy. Thanks for being with us.
It's a pleasure.
So I know that you've been out of the country for a few days. What was going through your head as you watched the chaos unfold from afar?
I wish I was still out of the country. I was in Jerusalem, so I did go to the Western Wall and pray for some calm. But it has all been a little bit mad. I mean, losing one cabinet minister in a day could be regarded as unfortunate. Losing two is something a little bit more serious. But, I feel sorry for the Prime Minister. I think, she is trying to navigate her way through the Brexit process. She's got to deliver on this referendum result, but she has a parliament that is largely hostile to the whole idea. So, she'd come up with this very sensible proposal, I thought, but unfortunately, the Conservative Party, not for the first time, has differing opinions on the issue of Europe.
Were you surprised to the degree to which those opinions differed and the way in which it manifested? Did it surprise you at all?
Yes, I wasn't necessarily surprised the Brexit secretary, who's David Davis, resigned because, this was the brief he was put into government for. I think he felt sidelined. I think genuinely he was perhaps correct to think that, because the negotiations have perhaps naturally been taken on more and more by number 10 as this process has gone on. I don't really get the Boris Johnson resignation. I mean, Boris has been a bit all over the shop on some of these issues. So I was surprised he went. I think I don't have any sympathy with his position. I think he signed up to what the Prime Minister was proposing on Friday, and then 3 days later, for whatever reason, decided to quit.
Is there any credence to the argument that some of those who are opposing the proposal, Theresa May's proposal, are making, in that it sort of weakens the negotiating position of the UK or of Britain when they're trying to make trade deals going forward?
Oh, that's undoubtedly the case. It's undoubtedly the case it's damaging our negotiations with the European Union. But the same has been true for what has been a 2-year relentless campaign by the Remain elements, those who want us to stay in the EU, who haven't been able to reconcile themselves to the democratic decision of the people. So they have, at various stages of this process, made it more difficult for the Prime Minister and the government than it needed to be. And now we have, I was a Brexiteer, but I'm not one of these people who would term themselves a hard Brexiteer. I think we have to have a sensible Brexit. But now we have the people on the other end of this who just believe we can just leave at on the 29th of March next year and have no agreements in place covering customs, covering our trading relationship with Europe. They are now engaging in the sort of behaviour we've seen these last few days and making the negotiation for the Prime Minister even more difficult than it already was. So, I wish everybody would just bang their heads together and be a little bit more grown up about this.
What do you think the chances of that are?
Well, you interview a lot of politicians. It is not impossible that some politicians might have egos and others might have leadership ambitions, and people jockey for position and all the rest of it. Look, I think at the end of the day, my colleagues in the Parliamentary Conservative Party, and indeed even across the House of Commons, have to understand that people made a decision. There are differing views on what our future relationship should be with Europe. But the one thing we should all agree on is we have to leave the European Union. That is what the people voted for. And the Prime Minister is quite sensibly, I think, trying to get us an agreement that has as little friction in place as possible when it comes to the movement of people and trade and goods following Brexit, but that actually does do the things that people voted to stop. So stop paying in, obviously stop being a member, stop the unlimited immigration. So I think she's trying her best. I honestly, for the first time in this process, I can't tell you definitively where I think this will end up at the moment, because, of course, it isn't yet clear how the Prime Minister's position in the Conservative Party will work out over these next few days. But, I think the only show in town, really, are the Prime Minister's proposals. So I think the Parliament just needs to get behind her.
Do you think that the Prime Minister's grip on power is at risk right now?
Well, interestingly, a number of colleagues have said the resignation of the Brexit Secretary, David Davis, was very damaging to her. But almost when Boris resigned yesterday, in some respects, it strengthened her hand. Colleagues feel a bit more united than perhaps they might otherwise have done, because they perhaps question his motives a bit more than they do David Davis's. But look, this is a prime minister who has been pretty tough and pretty resilient. She took over in the light of this referendum result. She campaigned for Remain. She absolutely now believes Brexit should mean Brexit. We had this general election, which we hoped would clear it even more last year. That didn't work out. She lost her parliamentary majority. She's had pretty much everything thrown at her. She gets insulted by the hardcore Remainers, insulted by the hardcore Brexiteers, and then she has a very aggressive Labour Party in opposition, and she has managed to survive and tough it out. So I'm a big fan of hers. I hope she continues to tough this out. I think the chances are that she probably will. But, the last couple of years in politics have shown that perhaps the one thing we certainly shouldn't do is make predictions.
On that, I just have a few seconds left, but I wanted to ask you because U.S. President Trump arrives in the U.K. for a visit, I believe, Thursday, says that your country is in, quote, turmoil, and it is, quote, up to the people whether Ms. May stays on as prime minister. What do you think about him weighing in on that?
Well, I think, I don't obsess about President Trump like some people do. I think the things he said about Canada have been pretty rude and pretty unacceptable. And he should probably just keep his neb out, as we say in Yorkshire, of our business. It's not his business. I think we could point back to him that it's looking pretty unsettled and fairly tumultuous times in the United States. So perhaps he should get his own house in order before he starts lecturing us over this side of the pond. But we welcome him all the same because he is the president of obviously our biggest security ally and all the rest of it. But he should keep his neb out.
All right, I'll leave it there. Thanks a lot, Mr. Percy.
Anytime.